of having Vaughn Bodkin speak to us and share with us this morning. And so thank you, Vaughn. May God bless everything you do here today.
Yeah, want to pray with me?
I will.
Father, I want to thank you for the excellent blessing of being able to take action before these people. And I ask, Lord God, that you would speak these words into their hearts, and may it bring joy, may it bring gladness, and may there be true peace that comes from you. You're the source of our peace. Please help me, I pray in your name, Jesus. Amen. There's so many stories that I could tell, and I like to tell stories because there's a lot of stories to tell, but remember all those stories? Adolfo, I saw you just a little while ago holding your head, and I just want to tell you I'm praying for you. So, whatever you're going through, I love you, man. And we should do that for one another. But then this morning, as I was walking outside our coach over there where we live, there was a couple of people walking down the street, and my dogs got loose, and we're out there. I'm trying to get the dogs back in, and these people, they stopped, and it was a privilege to be able to tell them. I was a little bit, my knees were knocking a little bit, and I think perhaps that they should provide Depends up here too, just in case, you know what I mean? But these people, as I shared with them the privilege of worshiping our dear Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, their minds and their eyes lit up. It was almost like I was talking to a couple of angels. And so I had the privilege of, for about 30 or 40 minutes there, talking to these people about Jesus' wonderful love. And of course, they were not in agreement with everything I said. And I was trying to teach them about, and get around about the way to teach that we rest in Jesus, what He's done. And we rest in His being our Creator. And we rest in Him being our Redeemer. And there's so many stories that I could tell you. But that's just one of them. And it was because I wanted to initiate that conversation, of which I do often. I force myself to do that, so that the Lord can bless me. Have you ever done that? I remember, way back, started a company, and I was just coming out of prison. And they told me to go get a job. And my grandfather had always said, you know, those teachers are going to tell you to work really hard and get good grades so you can grow up and get a good job. But I'm telling you, work really hard and get good grades and grow out and start your own company. I remember in the 3rd grade, so the teacher's like, you kids work really, she was really like that. She was shaky, and you kids work really hard and get good grades. So I'm like in the 3rd grade, and I raised my hand innocently, and I said, teacher, I don't want a job when I grow up. Well, you get up here at the class right now, and you tell the whole class why you don't want a job, smarty pants. So I got up there, it was my first public speaking event. And so I was scared, and but I just said, well, my grandpa says, you know, I work really hard, get good grades, grow up, start your own company, so you guys can work for me, and the teacher will be the secretary. There's a lot of stories I could tell you about that the Lord allowed me to experience before I realized that He was with me the whole time. I could tell you about the time when I stood there home from school one day, and my dad had been out there feeding a chopper with hay. And the chopper had a long PTO, it's a power takeoff shaft that has a grease zerk in it that spins at 540 RPMs that causes the chopper to chop the hay. And Dad's throwing hay into the chopper, and I'm home from school that day. Miserably cold. It was a wretched experience to have to go out there and feed the cows, let alone milk them. And so Dad's out there feeding the chopper the hay. And I'm watching this happen. And a rag that was hanging out of his back pocket got caught onto that grease zerk. And it started ripping the coveralls off from his body. Now I can tell you some stories about my father that would, you'd probably say you've taken way too much medicine. Don't tell me stories that are, unless they're true. Well, my dad was really strong. I saw him actually pick up a 900-pound heifer and carry her back into the barn after she had busted loose and flipped him in the face with a dirty tail and broke out of the stocks. He goes around her, catches the cow, brings her back, threw her down. He threw her down. He wasn't gentle. And milked the cow. But as these coveralls were being ripped off from him one day, he's standing there and he braced himself and all of his clothes came off as he stood there. Brand new coveralls, brand new Levi's, you know, that kind that has the emblem on it where cows can rip them apart. It's type marketing. Those people were telling the truth. Levi's are tough. Well, he's just ripped his clothes off, and so he's standing there. And just as it started to pull his arm down, and he grabs his arm, and it pulled his arm out of socket, and he fell to his knees. And the tractor died. A 300 horsepower tractor just suddenly died. And I always thought, you know, before I met Jesus, that Dad was just extra strong and killed the tractor. Okay? I could tell you a story about when the vehicle that I was driving was struck head on by a semi, face to face, corner to corner. The whole top half of the car was gone when it was all over with. The front axle of the semi was straddling the vehicle. Had become separated from the semi. As the semi went on over the top of me, and the lumber that it was carrying landed in the water in a river and was floating. I didn't get to see that. I was shaken. I don't know how I'm still here, guys.
Praise the Lord.
Really interesting stories that happened to me. Okay. Wow. I can tell you some stories about me, but what about the stories in the Bible about people who took action? Stories that we can read about, and we've all read about, stories about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. From the time we were little kids, we learned about these kids that were, no, I'm not going to worship your God. If it's the Lord's will, fine, He can save us. But if not, we're not worshiping your God. And so they took a stand, they took some action there, okay? Right? They were thrown into that furnace, of which it was so hot that it actually killed the person tending the fire, cooking. And they looked in there and they saw one like the Son of Man dancing around with these young boys. Daniel, he took a stand. He took a stand, didn't he? He was taken captive, and he made up his mind that he was going to minister. Please, just let me eat pulse and water. I don't need all that stuff that you're trying to feed me. And so these stories of people who took action, who took a stand for Jesus, took a stand for what was right, are stories to help us to have more faith in the one who's right here with us right now, and He loves us, and He died to save us, and He gave His perfect life instead of our record in heaven. His record is right next to our name for those of us who by faith see that name Jesus written by ours. And we can look on His hands and see our names engraved in His hands by faith, because He said so. I've loved you with an everlasting love. And all of these stories are given, and in the stories of our lives, the author and finisher of each one of our lives and of our faith has not just blessed me with marvelous miracles, but He's blessed you too. If you just think about those things so that you can muster strength to go forward with your future and with confidence.
Amen.
So many times the Lord blessed me. Can I wander away from this and still be heard? Is that possible?
Sure.
I have a loud voice and I don't like hiding back here, and I just don't mind speaking loudly. I could tell you so many stories. I could tell you about stories in prison where people got, just bad stuff, okay? And when I went, I don't know entirely why I had to go into prison, but I had to go. And I visited in there. I was on vacation for 5 years.
You're softening up.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. And so I was in prison for 5 years, and I got to see interesting things happen. And I was visited by angels in prison. I know that. Their faces beamed, and they came to visit me, and they tried to tell me about Jesus, and I'm like, they're telling me your Father in heaven loves you. And at that time in my life, I was so frustrated and angry because I was just so angry inside, and I was so confused. And I told them, you know what? My Father is a jackass. And you're going to try and tell me the word Father and love in the same sentence? My Father, he didn't talk with words, he talked with his fist. He was such an insecure man, and a drunk, and abusive, and just a slave taskmaster. And you know what? I'm thankful for him because we became friends later. But at that time, I was very angry. And so somebody came and visited me in prison and tried telling me about a Father who loves me personally. And I said, you know what? Leave me alone. My hero can leap over a tall building in a single bound. Superman was more impressive and more real to me than our God. How blind I was. I'm telling you these little stories because it's little influences in my life brought me to a place where I actually sought out God's help. And it was through evangelism, of which we were baptized. And Jack Cologne, he did marvelous evangelism, probably touched some of your lives too. And other people as well, evangelism. But we were brought into a church, okay? And so the Lord is leading, and he's using other people of influence, people who are taking action, people who didn't mind standing up for the Lord, and one of which was a Sabbath school teacher, Jack's mom. She told us would you please teach your children the 10 Commandments so that they can stand up in front of the church and recite those verses? Would you mind that? I was just dense to realize that she was asking me to learn the commandments at the same time. And we were blessed by that. And the Lord himself impressed that to happen for us. And so we as a family started learning these commandments and reciting the commandments, and we would recite the commandments and we would learn the commandments. And soon we had them learn. And we thought, well, this was fun to do as a family, so how about we keep memorizing verses? How about we keep on, I think I told you this story once before, but one time, maybe even last week, but the time that followed was so interesting because at that time coming into the church, I remember reading in a book that said, and it was one of those precious books that we hold dear and that we love, and that was so clear, it said these words: nothing is so calculated to quicken your senses and to increase your intellect. Any of you need that? Nothing is so calculated and to quicken your senses than to memorize Scripture. Calculated. I like that word. Specifically designed to go in and do some adjustments in there, and I need that. How about you? So we as a family were deciding we were going to memorize some scriptures. And so Lynn and I, we asked God's help, and we always invited everybody to vote on which topic we would memorize the scriptures on. Remember that? Seems like he always impressed us to memorize scriptures about his love. Because both of us came from fathers that really didn't show much love. There was never any goodnight kisses. There was never any hugs. There was never prayer in our family. There was not any pats on the back saying, good job. And I'm not looking for that, so I don't need that, so don't even try it. But what I'm trying to say to you is that we came from that kind of a background where there was much discouragement, much anger, and a lot of confusion. Even in my home, growing up, Dad left pornography magazines laying around in the home. Oh, gag! Because it affected my future badly. Anyway, so we memorized these scriptures, and we selected the topic of love. And we told the kids we were going to give them $1 for every verse that they memorized and could recite. And so we gave them $1 for everyone. And we learned the verses as a family. Fantastic blessings came from this for me and my wife Lynn and our family. By the time the kids were 14 and 15, our daughter had $7,000 saved up from this. Our son had about $6,500 saved up from this type of behavior. And we're studying about the Holy Spirit who can bring back to remembrance those things that have been put in here. So I'm so thankful that we were led by God to do that. We took action and He blessed. Okay? It was marvelous. There's so many stories in the Bible where people were blessed by taking action. But I just want to share some stories about how He's blessed me. How else can I be convincing to someone who may be walking past my coach who the Lord encourages me to talk to? How else can I be convincing unless I share what God has done for me personally? Not just by theory, but real stuff. So we're going along and baptized, we're teaching kids, we put them in the school, private school, and the Lord impressed me to go out and start selling books door to door as a literature evangelist. Okay? And at that time, I really didn't know Jesus, so don't get me wrong. I have not grown wings and flown away, okay? Not even now at all. But at that time, I was trying to earn God's salvation. Somehow, subconsciously, back in the back of my mind, I thought, okay, if I go do that, maybe I'll feel better. Maybe. Well, the Lord, I put one foot in front of the other and started knocking on doors. And I'm going to tell you a couple little stories that happened during that experience. We used to get our leads from leaving books in the hospital, so people, while they're waiting to go in to see the doctor, could read those books. And there would be a card in the front, and they could fill it out, send it in. So I got leads, but in between those scheduled meetings, I would knock on doors. And I didn't mind going into communities where it said, no soliciting. I didn't care, because I had too much confidence, I guess. But I actually went in there one time, and there is a sign. I'm going to tell you that story later. I'm knocking on doors, and I had a 6:30 meeting. And the 6:30 meeting was already scheduled, and it was with some Russian people. And apparently this whole community right here in that vicinity was Ukrainian, Russian, that dialect. Most of them spoke with that type of vernacular. And so I'm knocking on this door, and the door opened, and the man said, "You're the Bible salesman, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "We've been expecting you. Come on in." The table is set. This is where you're supposed to sit. We're having borscht. First time I ate borscht. I'm like, wow, who told these people I was coming? And so, I'm visiting and enjoying their company and listening a little bit about their lives, and we prayed together, and I presented the program, the books that I was sharing, and these people absolutely loved what I was sharing with them. And at the end of that, long story short, half an hour's $1,500 they wrote a check out for and bought a whole bunch of stuff. I thought, wow, pay rent this week. So I was thinking selfishly, but this is a real story that happened to me, okay? And so I'm like walking about this far off the ground, headed towards the next meeting at 6:30 that had already been prearranged, and I get over there, same complex, Russian family. And I get into my presentation, I share with what the Lord has done, and I share quotes in the books that I'm reading, and these people are just lovely, genuinely, spiritually interested people And so I thought, okay, I'm going to be a little manipulative here. And I pulled out the check and I said, these people just live right over there and they just bought $1,500 worth of books. How many would you folks like to buy? And the man says, let me see that. So he's looking at the check and he's like, you just sold these people books? He says, yes, I did. Huh? He says, you speak Latvian? I says, no. Why? He says, because those people don't speak English. How did you do that? Wow. That happened to me. How cool is that? You know, and so then the next story is, I'm walking up to a gate. It says no trespassing. Absolutely no trespassing. So I went on in. And this dog comes running up next to me and kind of jumps up on me, gets some mud on my suit, and comes down and wagging his tail, and so I pet the dog. I get up to the door, knock on the door, and this man who, long, straggly hair, and chain coming down, and tattoos all over, and comes to the door and says, and I won't tell you exactly what he said, but I'm going to tell you, what do you want? Who are you? And how did you get past my dog? I said, well, your dog loves me. Your dog's my friend. And I didn't feed your dog nothing. Oh, that dog should have turned you into hamburger by now. Nobody's allowed in this place. Did you read the sign? Absolutely no trespassing? I said, sir, I just came here to pray with you. Can I pray for you? I'm praying with everybody in the community, you included. Can I pray for you? He says, you know what? Anybody that can get past my dog without getting shredded, and who has the guts to just walk in where it says absolutely no trespassing, is welcome in my home. You got some guts. Talk to me. So time was going on, the kids were growing up. Folks, I only got 5 minutes left, and I have so many stories I can tell you. We moved to Idaho, okay? I had decided to go back into the roofing business because even though I was blessed and in the top sales in the Northwest, I just couldn't seem to pay the kids' education and go through. It was just, I was weak. I walked away. So we're in Idaho. We move out there. Our family was there, but we didn't have any Adventist friends there. So when we got there, a pastor met us there and shared that he was pastoring over 3 churches and that had vision of building a school out here in the country, and so I was intrigued by that faith, that action. This man was a man of action, kind of a manipulative man of action, and I can only see that because I'm like that. Okay, I know I'm like that. Bad. But this guy was a manipulator, and he was really good at it. And I can only see that because I am too. But he had a good vision, and he had a good motivation, and he was trying to build a school for the kids in the community, out in the country, in the midst of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cities, this little school. Oh, wowie. So we bought 40 acres. We're going to develop the land into housing lots around this property where we're building the school. We built the school. To develop 40 acres, I don't know how many of you have participated in that kind of an event, but that can really cause you to come down on your knees a lot. Not just to get past the city fathers who give the permission, but the adventure that's required and the money that's required to put in streets and water systems and all of the different amenities, let alone the engineering and all the approvals. And so we're going through this experience. Lynn and I were probably throwing out there, I'm guessing $20,000 a month to make this happen. Buying school buses, hiring teachers, trying to do everything. It wasn't even enough. It wasn't enough money. And so I asked God, I says, Lord, you know what? I need your help. It says right here that whatsoever I ask, believing, and it says that you're willing to bless me even more than I can ask or think. And I need your help, Lord. So I'm asking you to bless me twice as much as I could think. Got a call from Los Angeles to go down and look at some buildings down there. I'm a commercial roofing contractor at that time. I'd started a business. And got a call from Los Angeles. Meet this guy down there. Takes me over. We're looking at a 250,000 square foot metal roof complex that they wanted waterproofing done on. And they liked what I had to say. And so they hired me right there on the spot to put this roof on. And so I flew back home up to see, and I flew back home. And my wife is there. And she says, Vaughn, did Ronnie Elias get a hold of you? And I says, what do you mean? She says, I says, I don't know any Ronnie Elias. Yeah, you're supposed to meet with him tomorrow. It's regarding that 250,000 square foot building. They need you in that office tomorrow morning. Can you? So I turned around and went back on the airplane, back down there. I didn't know Ronnie Elias. I didn't meet with Ronnie Elias. I met with a company that Warren Buffett owned at that time called Marmon Keystone. And so I get there, and standing there waiting with a sign with my name on it was a little short Jewish guy, had his beanie on. I always joke with him about that, but anyway, the guy, just a lovely personality, and so I says, I don't know you. Why do you, the 250,000 square foot building, I thought we already had an agreement. He says, oh no, he says, I don't know what agreement you're talking about. He says, I heard that you know how to put roofs on. He says, I've got a 250,000 square foot building over here that needs a roof. 2 times the blessing. Ask, and it will be given. Okay? So my intention, and our intention, was basically to try and accelerate the development of this school. Another interesting thing happened at that time. It's 12 o'clock, folks. Anybody who wants to leave can. This will blow your mind, okay? It blew my mind anyway. And so this job, another job came through right down in Centralia, Washington. Some of you folks are probably from that vicinity. A company called Yardbirds called and asked us at that same time to put a roof on their building. So we did. I ordered the material. My Los Angeles crew came up, put the job on, got it all done. My Los Angeles superintendent calls me when he's done with the job. Now this is about the same time, and our faith was being tested in many different ways, and the Lord helped us to realize, okay, I am way more able than you can even ask or think to bless you. How much can you hold? This job got put on. My Los Angeles superintendent, after the job was completed, calls me and he says, Vaughn, what do you want me to do with all this product that's left over? I says, well, I ordered the exact amount plus 5% for that job. There shouldn't be that much. Just put it in the trailer and haul it to the next job. He says, Vaughn, there's a lot of product left over. I said, well, did you apply the product right? Is it done properly? What happened? What's going on? Why? Count up how much is left and call me back. Whoa, he calls me back, guys, and he says, this is how much left, this is how much of this product's left, this is how much of this product's left. And I look over here at the order form, and it was exactly the amount of product that I had ordered to do the job in the first place. There was enough to do another job just that same size. It was just, I'm not really good at math, but I think that's just multiplication. That happened to me. some marvelous things happened to us. And some interesting things happened to us that I'm going to tell you one more story. Give me 3 minutes, okay? Is that okay? I know you're hungry, and forgive me, but this is a fun story. Of all places, I don't really like Los Angeles, but I was down there, and I was trying to sell, and I met this fellow by the name of Becker, Warren Becker, lovely Jewish fellow, really. Great big man. He looked like J.P. Morgan? No. Anyway, this guy. Well, when I first met him, I saw outside of his building a whole bunch of very strongly built, unusually strong metal panels. And I asked him, and this, I'm going back a ways with this story. This is back when Lynn and I decided to give what was to the Lord. Give his tithe back to him. And I asked Mr. Becker, I said, Mr. Becker, what's all this steel out here? Why such heavy steel? Who would order such a product? That's really strong stuff. Oh, he says, some dumb farmer from Idaho ordered that from me. Gave me a little deposit. After we had the stuff built, he canceled the order. You can buy that stuff for 50 cents on the dollar. I'll sell it to you right now. I says, I don't have any need for that. Then we went into our presentation where I'm sharing with him what I'm going to do to help him on his buildings, and he hired us. He found out apparently that I was from Idaho, and so the association must have made him mad. Because here's all this steel out here, and I'm from Idaho. I don't know what caused him to do this, but we got the job all completed, and I went in there to get paid, and I am so naive sometimes, so forgive me. But this guy, Becker, he's sitting there, and I says, Mr. Becker, do you mind? I got to get paid. I got everything I have into this job, and I've got to get some money. Please pay me. He says, Vaughn, he says, you know what? You're at the beginning of your life. I'm at the end of mine. You've just been ripped off by a Jew. And that's what he said. But his words weren't so nice. I thought he was joking. I said, Mr. Becker, you know what? I signed that contract because my word is good. And if you have any problem with your roof, I'm glad to stand behind it anytime. I'll see you later. So I left. We had everything into that job. 6 months later, we weren't paid. $85,000 or so, I think, was what he owed us. I didn't even have the money to pay the manufacturer, except for by scrambling around doing other little projects to finally get them paid. End of the summer comes. We're still making up our minds to follow the Lord. And I had people, and as I was asking advice from business people, what do I do? Oh, sue the so-and-so. I don't want to sue anybody. What? Why wouldn't you sue them? Because the Lord said to pray for those people who use me. I'm not going to sue them. So we kept going. I must have really looked distraught, and my LA superintendent comes up to me and he says, Vaughn, now you got to remember this is a long time ago, and this guy is just at that time he was even an illegal alien. He was in from Guatemala, and I was trying to help his family, and now he's legal and beautiful family. But he's standing there and he says, Vaughn, he says, you know what? I know somebody would take that guy out for $50. I said, Jimmy, no, we're not going to be taking anybody out unless it's for dinner. And so time went on, and it was the end of the summer, and I'm driving around over in the mountains and the fields of Idaho, and I'm talking to farmers. And I had never done that before, and I came across this place where the man was just ready to listen about Jesus. And I started talking about Jesus to this man. And he says, Vaughn, you've got to come and join our church. You'd be a good Mormon. I said, well, that's good. I don't mind coming to your church, but I'm probably not going to be a Mormon in this lifetime. And he says, well, I need what you have. I need what you're talking about on this roof thing. He says, let me just put you in the bucket of my tractor and lift you up there so you can look and get an appraisal. So I got up there and calculated it up, and I told him, I got back down, I says, I'm so sorry. There is no way in the world that I'm going to let my guys walk on your roof. It's dangerous, corroded, and people would fall through and die. It needs new metal, I said. Ding, 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 ding. Ring-a-ding-ding-ding-ding. And I called up Becker and I said, Becker, you know all that money you owe me? How about you send all that steel over here to Idaho and $10,000 on top of it as your driver delivers it? There was silence on the other end of town down there, and I just waited. He says, what's the address? So, he told me how many square feet there was, and the metal that Becker had down there was within 500 square feet on a 40,000 square foot building to cover this building with new steel. They sent it up. On top of that, I sold him the steel for 50 cents on the dollar. Or no, I bought the steel for 50 cents on the dollar. Actually, it was 40 cents on the dollar. And the guy was willing to pay me 75 cents of what it was worth. And so I made a profit with that. And then on top of that, we sold the waterproofing system on top of that. And what does that have to do? I'm not trying to take any kind of glory here, folks. Jesus did this for me. Jesus did that. That's a miraculous story, isn't it?
Yes.
That blesses my heart every time I think about that, and I'll look forward with confidence knowing that He's done this. And He's done that in every one of your lives, hasn't He?
Yes.
He's done similar things in every one of your lives.
Yes.
My friend Rick is here. He's been working with us on our home over here. And you know what, Rick, thank you for coming to church. Thank you for being here. He's been coming here since we first met him, I guess, a few times, and more and more. And I just shared with Rick about the idea of being a Seventh-day Adventist, and and then I shared with him the rest of the story. As Paul Harvey used to say, how the Sabbath points us to the one who created it. How the Sabbath points us to one who died. How the Sabbath gives us the rest in Jesus' perfect life that He's given each one of us who will believe.
Yes.
And how many of you were there when you were created? Were you right there when did you have anything to do with your creation? Whether you were conceived in sin or not, we didn't. How many of us can add to what Jesus has done by saving our lives? All these little stories, and I've got stories I could tell you for a few more days if you want to hang out, but I'm hungry too. But the fact is these little stories in our lives, whether we knew Jesus or not at the time, He's trying desperately to help us to have more faith in what He's done for us, through us, and with us. The stories in the Bible, if you remember correctly, even the story of Abraham was a story of action. Okay? Now, sure, Abraham got a little action he shouldn't have gotten there, right? With Hagar. Oh, sorry about that. We're in church. But it's real. Action or not, doing what the Lord wants us to do or not, there's results. And the Lord, speaking of Abraham, could you imagine being that old and not having any kids? And back in those days, their name meant something, big time meant something. And he's like, yeah, the Lord, he changed my name. It's Abraham now. Oh, Abraham, father of many nations, huh? How many kids do you have, Abraham? I don't know how many kids. Oh, sure, the Lord changed your name. We don't have to worry about being mocked in our efforts. When we take action to do something, we can jump out there with both feet, one in front of the other, and know that Jesus said, I'm with you always,
Amen.
even to the end.